Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. Why do fans boo? It's a simple question, but it begs asking. Why do fans go to the game and voice their displeasure by booing in the stands? Well, there are plenty of reasons that you can probably think of as to why they boo. Their team is playing terribly. They don't agree with a decision made by a player or a coach. They don't agree with what the referee just called on the field. An announcement came on over the PA system that they don't like saying that beer sales are officially cut off. They're punting the ball instead of going for it. A player on the opposing team is playing that they hate for one reason or another. You get the idea. And I could go on and on about why fans boo when they're at a game, because there are about 10,000 other reasons that I didn't even mention that you can probably think of, and I won't bring up in the interest of time. However, of all the reasons to boo, this one from this game that you've been watching this whole time between the Chiefs and the Lions is up there with the strangest of the bunch. Chiefs fans are known as some of the best fans in the NFL, and it's not hard to see why. They make Arrowhead Stadium a nightmare for opposing teams, consistently ranking among the loudest fan bases in football. And while yes, there are a lot of Chiefs fans who hopped on the bandwagon right about now and are enjoying the good times, there are a lot who suffered through a half-century of not making the Super Bowl, and nearly a quarter-century of not winning a single playoff game. But in 2003, in what should have been an incredibly happy and joyous moment for the Chiefs, you had one player on the team bash his fan base and talk about how much they stunk. And when you understand what the Chiefs fan base did, or at the very least, what a very loud group of fans did, it's not hard to see why he felt this way and voiced his displeasure so publicly. Because this is the story behind one of the strangest incidents of fan behavior, considering the circumstances, in the over 60-year history of the Kansas City Chiefs franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand how the game was going, as well as the importance of this game for Chiefs fans across the country, and especially for the nearly 78,000 fans packed into Arrowhead Stadium on this day. It's December 14th, 2003. It's week 15 of the NFL season. And as we're wrapping up the year, we've got an interconference battle on our hands between the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. For the Lions, this game means absolutely nothing. They sit at 4-9 and are out of the playoff picture entirely, just looking at this point to avoid finishing with the worst record in football. But for the Chiefs, oh man, was this game a big deal. They sat at 11-2, and aside from the fact that they were very clearly the favorites to win this one, being favored by more than 2 touchdowns, they were 3 games up on the Denver Broncos for the lead in the AFC West with 3 to play. You can do the math on that. If the Chiefs win this game, then they're the champions of the AFC West for the first time since 1997. Not only that, but they enter this game tied with the New England Patriots for the best record in the AFC. So a win here, and they have a shot at home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And at the very least, should have a first-round bye on lockdown barring anything crazy. If you take care of business against a very bad Detroit team, then you get to celebrate your first division title in more than half a decade, and you get to do it in front of your home fans. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that. And unsurprisingly, there wasn't a whole lot of drama from this one. The Chiefs needed to take care of business, and by God, they took care of business and then some, as when the final whistle sounded in this one, the Chiefs were officially champions of the AFC West, winning their 12th game and taking it by a final score of 45-17. This game was never in any real danger. Kansas City's first 4 drives ended with 28 points, so they had a perfect start offensively, and they led it 21-0 midway through the second quarter before the Lions finally got on the board. In fact, this game was so ugly that on Kansas City's first 8 drives, they scored on 7 of them, netting 6 touchdowns and a field goal. The lone drive that didn't end with a score was a missed field goal at the end of the first half, where they drove 32 yards in about 15 seconds to get into field goal range in the first place. Hall of Fame tight end Tony Gonzalez had 2 receiving touchdowns. Priest Holmes had 3 rushing touchdowns. And quarterback Trent Green had the best game of his career, going 20 for 25, completing 80% of his passes for 341 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a perfect passer rating of 158.3. That is literally as high as it goes. It does not get better than that. All in all, just a dominant performance highlighting just how incredible of a season the team had up until this point. A thoroughly convincing win. So you would think that of the 78,000 fans that braved the cold at Arrowhead to watch their team win their first division title in 6 years, that it would be nothing but joy, right? Heck, I've been to a game very similar to this back in 2017, when the Jaguars played the Texans to clinch a playoff spot for the first time in a decade. The Jags won 45-7. The game was never in any danger, and it was just a dominant performance all the way around. The atmosphere was extremely festive and party-like, and then the realization hits that this is not a dream, and that this team that's been in the doldrums for so long is actually going to make the playoffs. But amazingly enough, it was not all sunshine and rainbows for Chiefs fans on this day. Because if there's one thing that we've got to talk about with the Chiefs, it's their run defense. Because, oh man, it was bad. The Chiefs may have been 12-2, but they were doing it in spite of their run defense, and definitely not because of it. Kansas City's offense was superb that season. They showed why in that Lions game where they scored 45 points in their first 8 drives, and showed why all season by finishing with the #1 offense in the league, having scored 484 points, or more than 30 points per game. But as you're about to watch, the defense, on the other hand, was another story, particularly against the run. The Chiefs finished the 2003 season with the worst rushing defense in the league. In terms of total yards allowed, they were 30th, and that would have likely been even worse had it not been for the fact that their offense was so good that opposing teams were behind often, so they would have to abandon the run in favor of larger chunk plays through the air. In terms of yards per carry, the Chiefs were dead last. The league-wide average was 3.9 yards per carry allowed, and a solid third of the teams allowed less than 4 yards per carry. The Chiefs, on the other hand, allowed an astonishingly high 5.2 yards per carry. They were the only team to allow 5 or more yards per carry. Seriously, imagine a team is starting a drive with 1st and 10, and after 2 plays, they've got a new set of downs, doing nothing but running. And that's what the Chiefs were giving up on average over the course of the entire season. How bad was the run defense? To be that bad against the run is almost unprecedented, and I don't say that lightly. Oddly enough, prior to the 2003 Chiefs, the last team to allow over 5 yards per carry against the run was the 1976 Kansas City Chiefs, who also allowed 5.2 yards per carry. It had been more than a quarter century since a team was this inept against the run. The last time a team allowed that many yards per carry on the ground over the course of an entire season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were still in the AFC. The playoffs still had 8 teams. America was celebrating its bicentennial, and somehow, we as a society were so off our rocker that we allowed Disco Duck to be at one point the #1 song in the country. We were all being clucks. There were many lowlights, as you've been able to see throughout these clips, but perhaps the biggest one was the previous week against the Denver Broncos. when the Chiefs lost 45-27 and allowed the Broncos to just run all over them. On the day, the Broncos only ran the ball 32 times. They picked up 270 yards. That is over 8.4 yards per carry, which is an obscene amount. Clinton Portis had 218 rushing yards on nearly 10 yards a carry, and picked up not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 touchdowns, having one of the greatest games by any running back in the history of the NFL. And while not every team was that good against the Chiefs on the ground, it was definitely a theme that you could run on the Chiefs without any real resistance at all. When you played 13 games so far, and you've had as many games where you held your opponent to under 100 yards rushing, as you have games where you allowed your opponent to pick up at least 200 yards rushing, that is a really bad sign, and that could spell trouble come the playoffs. Which takes us back to this game against the Lions. Again, by this point in the contest, the game is over. The Chiefs lead it by 24, and they've already swapped out quarterback Trent Green with backup Todd Collins, so as not to risk injury, and so as to preserve the perfect passer rating. It's 3rd and 8. The Lions are pinned at their own 3-yard line with about 7.5 minutes left, and with no breathing room whatsoever, they're just going to hand the ball off to their running back, 4th-year man Sean Bryson. Bryson is not good by any means. In his last 9 games, despite being the feature back, he only picked up 302 yards on 3.3 yards per carry and 1 touchdown. But he's about to do something here that sends Chiefs fans into an absolute frenzy. Roll the tape.
Tailgate before the game, during the game, and after the game.
3rd down, Sean Bryson ready to the teeth of the line. Now he cuts it outside. Bryson with room to go at the 30, 35, 40. Bryson finally shoved out of bounds at the 45-yard line. And they're going to say he stepped out at the 42.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that after he got the first down and after the play? That's right. There were boos. Very audible boos. Allowing Clinton Portis to run all over you is one thing. He's one of the best running backs in the league. But on 3rd and 8, you just allowed Sean freaking Bryson to run all over you and pick up over 100 yards rushing on the day. And with that, despite the fact that this play and this run meant absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, since again, the Chiefs had this game in the bag, Chiefs fans were incredibly upset that their run defense was this porous, so as not to be able to stop a simple running play on 3rd down from their own 3-yard line. And the boos came out. Now, if it was just 1 or 2 fans booing and they were super close to a mic, that's one thing. That's a non-story. But the boos were so loud that Chiefs players noticed. Chiefs players actually noticed their fans, in the middle of what should have been an AFC West Division title celebration, were unhappy. And they did not take too kindly to the reaction. I'll just put it that way. Said defensive end Eric Hicks, "I heard them. I don't think that's a very nice way to treat the first team to win the AFC West in 6 years." He then added, "They can boo all they want, but we're AFC West champs. I don't think that's any way to congratulate a team that hasn't won the division in 6 years." Safe to say, not only were the fans not happy, but he was incredibly unhappy about the situation too. The fans were angry at the players, and the players were unhappy at the fans. All after a game in which the Chiefs won by 24 points to win the division title. As we would later find out, this game would almost be a final hurrah for Sean Bryson in terms of his NFL career. Sure, he played in the league all the way up until 2006, spending all that time with the Detroit Lions. But after that game against the Kansas City Chiefs, he didn't really do much of anything. He made just 4 more starts the rest of his career and scored just 1 more touchdown, which came in Week 4 of the 2005 season against the Baltimore Ravens. His final legacy in the NFL was being the man that Chiefs fans booed after he got a big run on them in the 4th quarter, in complete garbage time. So that raises the question that I would love to hear your thoughts on in the comments section. Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the fans for booing their team for their poor run defense? Especially since the fans spent their hard-earned money on this game in a win chill of 0 and have every right to voice their displeasure? Or are you on the side of the players for being upset that the fans, in the middle of winning a game, taking care of business, and clinching the team's first division title in 6 years, decided to boo the team for one play in the middle of the fourth quarter when some of the backups were already in? Then again, Chiefs fans could make the argument that it wasn't just one play, but rather a culmination of plays that led up to this. And they wouldn't be booing if you didn't allow a bad running back to run for 39 yards and didn't have the worst run defense in football in nearly 30 years. It is an interesting debate, and it can definitely go either way. Regardless, in 2003, Chiefs fans made their frustrations very clear and well known. They said that no matter how well you might be playing, you can't run away from the fact that you can't stop the run. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.